I like coming to live, spirit and coffee. Got my coffee here. hmm Yum, yum, yum. So good. Okay, so let's get started. Um, I want to talk about so I'm reading this book. It's The Living Labyrinth, Exploring Universal Themes and Myths, Dreams, and Symbolism of Waking Life. And this is a really good book. It's really quite awesome because it talks about a lot of good morning, Joe, some of the Dove. Sorry. Good morning for those on Facebook. Please say good morning. Just hear you, see who's on here, although I can't see at this point. But what I love about this book is that it talks about the different kind of like the archetypal figures that show up within the storyline. And we have this and we see this throughout, and it gets played over and over again. As I was talking about patterns being, good morning, Sina, playing out over and over again. That, people aren't necessarily prophesizing, they're just looking at the pattern. So, what I'm going to talk about today is the shadow, the trickster, and the willing sacrifice, the evolving energy in ancient and modern life, which is really kind of cool. I love this because the trickster is something that we oftentimes don't see coming. Good morning, Kanik. And we don't see it coming, and that's why it's the trickster. However, it is the trickster is the one that sort of ignites this new way of looking at the world, and it allows us to sort of transcend or to open up the consciousness a little bit bigger. And this is something that they typically don't talk about, is the trickster. They have the character played out in movies all the time, even cartoons, all that kind of stuff. So the trickster is always there. And it's always in every mythological story that we see. And we see it play out in our human, right, play that we do in our waking life, sort of play out as well. And in the unconscious mind coming to the conscious mind. Good morning, Charles Truth. So the trickster or the shadow trickster, something that we should understand. How do we understand the trickster in our life so that we can actually expand our consciousness? Okay, which is cool. Okay, so here we go. Trickster is at one and the same time creator and destroyer. So you could think of it as Kali, right? Kali is creating and destroying at the same time. Giver and negator. He who dupes others and is always duped himself. He knows neither good nor evil, yet he is responsible for both. So, understanding this particular character and how it plays out in our life, super important. And also, when we see a trickster entering into our life, we would understand that when a trickster enters our life, that they are actually sort of the elixir or sort of this thing for alchemic transformation and shift. It's kind of cool because it's the catalyst for this transformation. Is the journey fun? No, sometimes we're duped, sometimes we're like, why did we do that? But it's waking us up to a deeper level of understanding. Okay, in the Oedipus story, the blind soothsayer Tiresias plays a pivotal role. One crucial aspect of that role is fulfilling the function of the archetypal trickster. He is the same Tiresias who, prior to the involvement in the Oedipus narrative, played a similar ambiguous archetypal trickster role in the Olympian battle of the sexes by getting himself transformed into a woman for several years and then back into a man again. This transformative experience makes him the ideal person to settle the argument between Zeus, the king of gods, and his wife, Hera, over which partner generally derives the greatest pleasures from sexual intercourse, the man or the woman. Zeus summons Tiresias to offer his unique testimony on this question, and Tiresias answers, I assume honestly that if the pleasure of lovemaking be divided into 4 parts, then 3 belong to the woman and 1 to the man. Zeus is annoyed by this answer, and in this version of the myth, it is Zeus who blinds Tiresias for this impairment, candor, in answering the god's question. Okay, what does this have to say? This is really important and something that I was talking about with a friend the other day. The fact that we women, or embodiment of a woman, right? I'm talking about like our physiology and all that stuff. We are able to have multiple orgasms, right, as women. And so the trickster comes in, right? And Zeus is not very happy by this answer, because they were, fighting. And so he gets put to damnation. Now, when we see this play out in society from human sexuality and intimacy, we can kind of see it from the space of, the idea that, oh, well, men, they've got to have it, or they, like this idea, right? But when we're reading from this particular book, we realize that women have a higher stamina and sexual drive. So the trickster comes in and pisses off the patriarchy, and the patriarchy then starts. And we can say that the beginning of this story could be the sexual desire and pleasure, where Zeus was upset. Now, this is again mythology, right, being played out. But if we see it from the social construct, we can see that it sort of has played out in society when we have these conversations. Good morning, Kumar. Something that we don't typically talk about, right? Sexual connection with individuals. Good morning, Carmen. We typically steer away from those talks about sexuality and intimacy. Or if we do talk about it, people are still not ready for that conversation. But when we're looking at the trickster and the way that this talks about it, makes a lot of sense when we look at society, right? I'm like, whoa, that's kind of crazy. And still having the mindset that, men, because there's that mindset, well, men think about it all the time and women just don't think about it. And that's not that's not true. That's a lie, right? That's something that's been constructed and created, and mostly women been shamed for maybe having sexual desire or wanting to engage in sexual relations. And so the story of the trickster kind of like lends to that, right? It's talking about it. And so Zeus gets upset because women, we have the ability to have a higher sex drive than men, and that's just the truth. And is it a bad thing? No, we just have stamina. We have a greater stamina, and probably because we're able to hold birth, so we've got to be able to like allow this to happen over and over again in order to get pregnant, right? That's what women do. So they lure in the sex, and we've sort of put this construct in society right now where it's like, oh, only men, they're what are the excuses? Oh man, they're just, they're horny, or they're this or they're that. And then that's normal for men, but not for women. And I, had to have this conversation with someone. I said, no, the reality is that women can have multiple orgasms and we have a higher stamina. So really, we are the sexual creatures. And the reality is that our sex drive's higher because of that, because we're able to have over and over and over and over and over again, right? It's not just kind of like this one time thing. So, so there you go. The uncomfortable talking about it. And it's in the book. That's what I'm reading. Okay. In that moment of meting out this punishment, Zeus himself assumes the mantle of spurn trickster, preferring his own opinion and power to enforce it over the truth, even after the larger truth has been clearly revealed. Stubbornness in the face of overwhelming evidence is another classic hallmark of energy of the archetypal trickster, as it is the human consciousness itself. So the trickster comes in. And I mean, it's kind of fun to be able to talk about, intimacy and sexual relationships. I think we're at a time where we're starting to heal around that and understand what that means. We couldn't talk about it before, right? It was something that was hush hush. Don't talk about that. It's bad. It's this. It's that. Made sinful for all that. Now, there is. If we looked at the shadow of feminine, right, and this is where it kind of breaks down, because we can say that the shadow feminine, it's too much of something. right? And that's where we talk about the idea of sin, right? In sexual pleasure. But and it starts getting distorted the further away that you get from its ultimate meaning of what does it mean to be intimate with an individual. And as you start to remove yourself and get distorted and go further into the shadow, people are doing all kinds of weird stuff, right? And so it's too much and it becomes lust and it's overindulgence and it's crazy. So that's not what we're talking about here, right? We're talking about the ability for the genders, if you looked at it, man and woman, and the way that it's played out, is that, women have been, sort of shamed around this idea of being sexual creatures. And so the idea in society that men have a higher sex drive sort of surfaced, and women really just couldn't talk about it, right? They couldn't say, yeah, I have a strong sexual desire, right? Because then they were labeled something and then they were shamed, right? Or you know they were called names, basically. And so women just kept their mouths shut. The reality is that women, have a higher sex drive. We do, and that's just the way it is. And we receive a greater pleasure than men do, and it's always going to be that way. I mean, we know this. Even dolphins. Look at all these like the animals that actually have some pleasure from intimacy, and so women have this greater capacity to receive pleasure. That's just the way it is. Okay. Now, if this is an uncomfortable conversation for you guys, people are in and out. They're like, I don't know if I want to talk about this, but it's part of the story. And it is part of the trickster story. So when it comes to the answer to the question that the Queen Jocasta, the king, and King Opedius ask the reason for the feminine that has overtaken the lands of Thebes, Tiresias does it again. He reveals the suppressed truth that has always been there, lurking just below the surface of conscious awareness. His answer upsets the apple cart and brings the whole regal assumption of power, moral superiority, and unquestioned righteousness crashing down in ruins. This overturning of arrogant assumption and being the agent of poetic justice has always been a major part of the archetypal trickster's task. Okay, so when we're looking for the trickster in our storyline, right, they crash everything. Hi, Daniel from Brazil. How are you? Hi, Anna. Hi, Jennifer. So it comes crashing down in poetic justice. So now we have the coyote, right? When the coyote follows the earth maker around, amending and undoing his work, he too is playing the archetypal role of the trickster. He restores a kind of precious balance in the cosmos. He reminds everyone, including Earthmaker himself, that the unknown is still stronger than the known. In performing this part of the archetypal trickster's task, he laid claim to the new territory of human consciousness, self-awareness, and choice in the larger landscape of divine creation. So again, the trickster letting them know that there is more unknown than known. The trickster in our life is pretty hard. It's a hard character to work with, okay? And understanding how to use the trickster in our life is critical because it really is the catalyst for alchemic transformation in our spirit, mind, body. It can flip us over our head, right? And we don't even realize it. Now, who is the trickster? Those are the archetypes that show up in your life. They're the people, but they're also inside you, embedded in you. Like you yourself have it in you to be a trickster or to trick yourself, right? You hold the archetype of the trickster as well. We all do. And sometimes we do that to ourselves in order to, again, expand our consciousness. So we don't necessarily talk about the trickster archetype as often. We do see it play out in politics, of course, right? You look in politics, there's a lot of that happening. They're playing into a role because the storyline is sort of the same. The storyline plays out over and over and over again, right? The same thing. If you look at history, right? The fall of Rome, and now we're seeing that certain countries are probably not going to make it with, their commerce. It's going to fall based on greed and need to have more, and then the trickster comes in and takes it all away. And now there's nothing left. But then there's still something there to rebuild again. So, and it plays out, right? Okay, so let's take a look. IFAN. IFAN? Are you saying you're a fan? Thank you. Okay, so let's see. He claims self-awareness, the very deep level. The trickster is an archetypal symbol of human consciousness itself, in reflection of the simultaneous strengths and weaknesses of human consciousness. Trickster always goes about performing the ironically sacred task arrogantly and clumsily. Clumsily. I like when I say some of these words and I stumble, but it's funny. But with amazing tenacity and creativity. When the jealous and apprehensive god and goddesses trick Izanagi and Izanami into abstaining from sexual intercourse, even after they are officially married, they too are assuming the energy role of the trickster. When little Gugian shape changes into a single grain of barley and tricks the angry great goddess in her moment guise as a hen into eating him. So he too fulfills the aspect of the archetypal role of the trickster. He brings to light by his action the truth that had previously been unconscious. So it's basically the trickster is taking what's unconscious and bringing it into the consciousness. And I've been talking about the unconscious and consciousness. It's almost like pulling the rabbit out of the rabbit hat, right? We have a hat and then we just like go in and then we pull it out, right? And we're like hoping to get the rabbit. And instead we get, I don't know, something else. And we're like, whoa, that's not what I wanted, but that's what we have. And that's what we need in order to expand the consciousness. Now, when we pull something out of the unconscious to dissect it, it is coming from something that's irrational and doesn't have any rationality on it. So when we're looking at it, we're trying to make sense of it. We're trying to understand it. We're trying to find the clarity that we need around it. And when we start to find clarity, right, then we start to expand our understanding of the world. And this is cool. This is why the fool, the joker, right, or the fool, right, could be kind of, I guess, considered the trickster. If you looked at the fool is just kind of lollygagging with his heads in the clouds, not really caring, just kind of stumbling along, going, we become the fool again. Okay, good morning, Lorena. And when we become the fool, what we allow is for this catalyst of the trickster to come in, and he starts sort of the process of our spiritual elixir connection and opens up our mind to different ways of seeing the world. And it's quite interesting because we start to expand the way that we engage our perception of the world, and things shift. But if you're holding on to your own perception without allowing this process to happen, we remain in our set of consciousness, doesn't expand out. We want to be, if we want to expand, and people say, well, I'm on a higher level of consciousness, or, we're just more woke than others. And I'm like, okay, how can you be more woke than somebody else? You don't know. You don't understand. You don't know what their life is. You don't know what they know and all that stuff. And if you went into their world, then you would expand. So when we do that, when we say those things, what we do is we close ourselves off from the expansion of consciousness, because we're basically not giving anybody else a chance to see their worldview or see the way life is. And they could be the trickster in our life. They could be the one that is the catalyst for us to expand our consciousness. So they enter your life, they start something, or maybe it's an energy that shows up inside of you, and it starts to have you question life. But if you're so set on this is the way it is and that's that, you're never going to allow for the expansion of consciousness. It just won't happen. You have to be able to dive into the shadows of the unconscious mind, and you've got to be able to and willing to accept whatever shows up, which is kind of scary for most, because it's like, think about it, it's like going into the dark, like maybe going into the ocean and not being able to see. And like, what creature are you gonna touch? You don't know. We don't know what's down there. Some weird creatures down there. There's a lot of creatures we don't even know that are just kind of down below in this dark, vast space. So we don't know what we're gonna grab. And when we start going into our unconscious mind, we're afraid of what we might pull out of the hat. We're like, oh God, am I ready for this? And then that's where courage comes in, right? And brave. And I've talked about that before. So the trickster shows up in so many different formats. Now we have the trickster of sexuality that I talked about, that the book talked about, and something that I've been contemplating and trying to understand, right? In terms of, what does it mean? What does this intimacy mean with an individual? How does it get played out? How do you play it out in your life? Right? People will say, well, I'm married, or I'm this, or I'm that, or I'm not married. I don't want to be married. What is it? How does it play out in your life? And how is it helping you grow in your level of consciousness and understanding of the world? There's other tricksters. There's a really great story in here. And it is the anger and the Amaterasu, the goddess of the sun. And so she creates the world, and then she gets really upset with her brother, who's clumsy, and he becomes one of the tricksters, but she throws him out into sort of the ether, out into the nothingness, and he's trying to get back. And so he doesn't know what to give her, because she's a creator of all. What could she want that he could possibly offer her, right? She has it all. And so and so she has it all. And so he knows that he can't give her anything. And so what does he do? He constructs this beautiful horse. He goes to the guards. Anyway, she gets really angry. Story goes like this. She gets really angry, and she shuts herself off from them. And basically, there's no more sun. She puts the rocks in place. And then the next trickster comes in. They're like, we're all doomed for damnation. We're all going to die. So what do? Well, the trickster archetype comes in, right? And this is where the trickster comes in to trick the god. Trickster comes in and says, well, let's party. Rather than weep in sorrow and her feeling like she has control over everything, they say, let's party. So they start to party and laugh. And she's thinking, how can they be laughing when they're about to die? So she peeks out. And then as she peeks out of the mountain, her life is so bright. Good morning, Quadi. I don't know if you're still on here. Her light is so bright that it reflects back to her. She never has seen her reflection, so she thinks it's another god. She doesn't know it's her. And they trick her out of hiding. So, good morning, Linga. So again, the trickster plays so many different roles. Also, if Quadi's still on here, it could be the trickster of the flat earth. That archetype is showing up. That archetype of the trickster shows up in all storylines. And what it does is it flips us on our head to expand our consciousness. So again, if let's say now we can take it from the sexuality piece to like what's happening now with, again, like the flat earth stuff. What story's real? What story's not real? Well, it's perception. And I think Linga had talked about that the other day. It's perception. Well, perception is important because it allows us to expand consciousness, right? And yeah, I did actually go and do some research. I didn't dig too deep. I did find some pure articles, and I started looking at mathematics. I started there because I don't start on popular media. That's not how I do my research. Not like, I don't necessarily do my research, but I do want to give you guys an update, right? Because I promised that I would do that. And I like the trickster story. I think that if you go in and you look at the archetype of the trickster, you might understand what is happening with that particular storyline. of the earth flat or round. So I did research and I started looking at mathematics and aerodynamics to see if I can sort of understand the mathematics behind it. Now, I used to be pretty good at math, but I went there and I was like, yeah, I don't really know what all this means, but it's okay. I'm going to read. And there was like these under some of the aerodynamic people, they would leave some notes like as what they were trying to do. And then I stumbled across, I'm sure the article that everybody's basing this flat earth on was, I stumbled across the article that came from, I believe it was NASA, and it was a module talking about how they would do aerodynamics on a flat earth, non-moving earth. And so I read it. You know, that's what I do. I read and I started to read it and I read it pretty intensely and I said, interesting. I wonder why they would do that. But I don't just stop there. I don't just say, okay, well, they did this, so it must be flat. No, there's multiple perspectives on this. Started reading and they said that they did do that and they did have models, but they also have models on a spherical earth. Now, what I would say is that perhaps maybe they don't know. They themselves don't know. They say they've gone out into space and stuff, and we've seen people go out to space. So, you know, maybe they do know, and maybe who knows? Maybe it's neither. I don't know because I haven't been to outer space. I don't know what it looks like from up there. I don't have a clue what it looks like from up there. So for me, when I was doing this research, it kind of stopped there. And we'll see if more information comes in and if I want to do more research on it. But I did actually read the papers that they did through NASA. I actually read them. And I was like, oh, interesting. But it didn't say that they were real life. It just said that they were modules. So I don't know if they've applied those particular mathematical equations to actual aerodynamics in flight. That was something that I was looking into, and then I didn't have time to finish. So there you go. Just so you know, there's how I do my research. I don't just go and listen to podcasts and people and other. Then my friend sent me a podcast of this guy who was negating it, and I didn't really particularly believe what he was saying. So I just don't listen to other people. I just do my own reading and try to make the picture for myself of what is going on. But then what came up is this trickster story, and that's what I'm talking about today. Because the reality is rather this, and this is a good conversation, right? Good morning from Pakistan. Good morning, Arcosta and Asmink. I'm saying it wrong, sorry. The storyline of the trickster. Flat earth or not flat earth, but let's just look at this. Let's look at it from a different perspective that probably nobody's talking about. I almost guarantee nobody's talking about it. Is from this archetypal perspective of the storyline. We live in a big, ginormous story. We are characters playing out a story. Now, when we're playing out the story, there are certain patterns that show up and resurface over and over and over and over again. Okay, and this is throughout history. This is not just something made up. We see it and we hear it in our myth stories, but we also see people embodying these particular archetypes. Okay, like Aphrodite or Venus, if you want to call it, right? Zeus, right? Or Hermes Trismegistus or Thoth, right? Or Justice, right? Shows up. We have all of these figures that show up in the macrocosm pattern. Okay, this is the greater pattern. Now, when we're looking and we're talking about subjects of round earth and flat earth, that the trickster character can come in to change the perception of the masses. Why? Why does it do that? It does it to expand our level of consciousness, to see it from a different perspective. Does that make it more true than the other? No. It changes our perception about how we see it, okay? Nature's lover. Now, here's the deal. Does it matter? Perhaps, okay, it does. It could matter in terms of science, right? So the trickster is pushing the boundaries. Yes, absolutely. That is what the trickster does. Okay. Thanks, Linga. I'm glad that you get this. You're so smart. So the trickster comes in, right? And tricks us into something. And then we start to say, well, it must be that way, or we play into that. And then what it is it's the catalyst for us to open our perception to something greater, which is why I don't take everything, at face value. I'm like, okay, if that's the perception of the world, I want to look into it, and I will. And I'll look and I'll see for myself. Now I'm going to have my own understanding of it and how it's going to play into my life and how it's going to shape the way that I see the world. And I'll share that with individuals. And have I got duped before? Yes. The trickster's been in my life many of times. Okay. And it's overthrown me on my head. To what end? Who do they work for? They work for nobody. The trickster in the story, right? The trickster has already been and complete. No, the trickster has not completed his job. Quite damn sorry. I'm going to have to say no. The trickster always is at play. There's no completion to the story. This story has gone on for centuries. Just go back and look at the pyramids. It's not going to end. If it was ending, we'd all be disappeared into perfectness, but we're not. We're not perfect, and we're perfectly imperfect. I'll say that, but we're part of the greater whole. But we still look like we're fragmented. If it was perfect, nobody'd be fighting. You wouldn't be fighting. There would be no fighting. Everybody would love each other. We'd all be singing "Kumbaya," and shit stirs never gives up. They love it too much. Shit stirs never give up. Yeah, and it's not a bad thing. That's what I want you guys to understand. It's not a bad thing. Everybody has an archetypal role to play, and it's a beautiful thing. That's what I'm trying to get at, because it's beautiful when the trickster enters your life. Why? Because you know that you're ready to expand your consciousness. And if you can see it from that perspective, the trickster doesn't know. The trickster in all of these stories don't know. And it says it here. The trickster themselves, they're neither good nor bad. And they just bring about poetic justice. They allow for poetic justice to actually come in, and they allow for the balance to be restored, to start all over again. I mean, it sounds like your life, right? It's like all of a sudden, all this shit happens. You think you got it together. Okay, we'll just put it in this very simple terms, right? Okay, not completed. I didn't fall for the trick. Okay. Okay. So, and that's good. So, but we do sometimes in our life fall for the trick, right? Regardless of how you see it. So it could be another scenario in your life where you fell for the trick, right? Where it comes in. Haha, how ironic. It's doing its job of the subconscious. Yes, and I would say it's nearly a catalyst. Amen. And not subconscious, but the unconscious. Difference, distinction. And I think that that's what's misdirected us too, is that there's this distinction between the subconscious and the unconscious. The unconscious is really sort of that I don't know what I don't know, and pulling stuff out of the rabbit hat and looking at it and going, what the hell is this? Okay. So yes, it is the catalyst for it. So okay, so we're looking at the trickster. Now we see this in our life all the time, right? It's like someone enters our life, they stir the pot, they flip us over on our head, we don't want to accept it, and then all of a sudden we become this new thing. But they were really just the catalyst for us to expand our consciousness. Again, it's pulling out of the unconscious, looking at what's there so that we can then rationalize what is unrational. But can we truly rationalize the unrational? No, but the conscious is always going to do that. Our conscious mind is always going to try to rationalize what is unconscious, that dark space, the things we don't understand. Okay, so all the conspiracy theorists out there are playing the trickster role. No, not all of them. Not all of them, no. But there are people. People would call me a conspiracy theorist, and I don't know how I feel about that word. That's Natalie talking. I don't particularly like the word conspiracy. Okay, and I'm going to say that there's different ways of viewing the world, and there's different storylines at play. Whose story is more true than the other? And the reality is that there could be multiple truths. Number one. Number two, the truth is really, when we talk about truth, really is a rational state of mind, embedded in fact. Fact being yes or no. I mean, you can't, it's like the apple fell. That's a fact. Okay. The apple fell and hit my head. That's a fact. Now, let's go into the interpretation of the apple falling and hitting my head. The apple fell and hit my head. God is terrible for letting that happen. Okay. That's not true. Someone can say, well, the tree is terrible for letting that happen, or whatever. So again, that's a bad thing. Or someone calls you an asshole. This is another one. Someone calls you an asshole. You receive that. Good morning, Echo. Someone receives that. Okay, you're an asshole, right? And then you're like, okay, that person's rude. Okay, that is your perception. That is not true. What is true is that someone called you an asshole. That's the truth. It's true or false that they said it. Did they say it? Yeah, they said it. Now, the meaning that we put behind it, is it true? No, it's the perception that we put behind it. To you, yes, I might be. Does it make me one? Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right, Linga. So it doesn't mean you are, and that's it. So I used to have a coach that would say, we're meaning making machines. We make meaning on everything. If we just sat, so just think of it for that, we just sat there and didn't say anything and just viewed the world as factual, and that's it. Said no words and just looked and went on our day about the facts. Life would be boring. It would be boring and mundane. So we make up all these stories and these meanings, but these stories, right, sort of have a pattern that have been played out over and over and over and over again. Now, the archetype that shows up that I'm talking about is the trickster. The trickster then goes into the unconscious and sort of plays with the conscious mind. It expands consciousness. It is consciousness itself. And I think that's what it said in this book. It's consciousness itself. So it's pretty cool. But if you know what's going on, so for instance, like the flat earth, we'll say again, right? So Quad D says, look, I wasn't tricked. The earth is flat. That's his perception, right? Hey, Lala. So again, the trickster shows up. And some people will say, well, no, that's the trickster coming in to say that the earth is flat so that we can be duped into something that's not true. And, or the opposite. We were duped into the trickster that said that the earth was round, and now we're being duped, right? So which one is truer? Which one is real? I mean, I can't say. I've never been to outer space. I can't give a definite answer. I can't say a yes or no. That would just be totally small-minded of me to say that either one is true or not true. I can only state what the facts are. The facts are that I did read an article from NASA that said this thing. That's fact. Now, my interpretation of what that might mean, did they use it? I have questions. And did they use those flight models? And do they still use those flight models, or do they use spherical? Well, they said they use both, is what I read, depending on the situation, depending on what they're flying, depending on air missiles and all these other things, right? Okay, I don't really know what that means still. I can't come to a conclusion based on that. I still need more information. So I become neutral, right, in that situation where I can't side with one or the other because I don't know. And for me to say that I know would be small-minded in my mind, because I would be saying I for certainly know, which I certainly do not. which I certainly don't know shit, which is the truth. Oh, it's too funny. This stuff gets fun. So yes, the trickster. So look at the tricksters in your life, and try to identify them, and not just as the people that show up in your life, but also as the bigger archetypal meaning of the trickster in your life and how it shows up. But remember, when it does show up, it's there to expand your consciousness. It's there to teach you how to expand the consciousness. Okay, good morning, Rose. So the biggest one we talked about today, and I want to repeat it, is sex, sexual pleasures, right? And who has a bigger sex drive, and that the goddess or the god changed himself from a man to a woman, and had and Zeus asked. Again, that was the story. Zeus said, yo, who has better pleasure, men or women? You can like rectify this. And he said, women. And Zeus didn't like that. And so now that we see it played out in society with, oh, men are just like that. I mean, we have all these sayings. It's crazy to me where it's like, oh, man, they have to, they're just like that. And that's a Western thought. Okay. I don't know if it's around the world, but I can tell you that it's a very Western thought. That, he cheated. Well, man, that's the way they are. They have a higher sexual drive or desire. I'm like, that's a lie. That's not true. That's not factual. And it's not factual. Why? Because women were designed to have multiple orgasm and higher sexual drive. So for that, how could that be played out? Think about from the facts perspective, doesn't even make sense. They have a higher stamina, right? But they've been made wrong, and the trickster came in and said, we're going to make women wrong for having sexual desire. Now, when you again look at the shadow archetype of the woman, and if it's living in sin, which is not sin in terms of damnation or hell, what I'm talking about is being too much into it that it becomes lust. That right there is sin. It means we're missing the mark. It means we're putting ourselves in our own suffering and bondage to this particular to sexuality. But there's a healthy balance within it. And to understand that, right, we come to this middle point of what it means to us to balance that energy within us. And so there's even practices to help people restore the balance, right? Which would be, there's tantric, right? And there's and tantric is not just tantric sex. It's not the engagement of that either. There's yoga. There's all of these things that you can do to sort of work with that energy so that it doesn't turn over on its head to the shadow feminine, and that it doesn't become this lust-driven thing. Instead, you start to heal, right? And then you understand the sacredness of that engagement between two people. Kundalini, yes. You could be the trickster, no offense. Quad D, I could be all of the above. And in fact, we are all of the above. So yes, I could be the trickster. I can also be Aphrodite. I can also be Thoth. I can also be the child. And let me tell you, I'm all the above. So, and I'm not offended by it whatsoever. The point is that we, right, as human beings have the capacity to embody all the archetypes. When you start to understand your archetypal pattern within your own self, then you can actually start to come to holism and ascended consciousness, if that makes sense to you. So we get to embody those things. Of course, the trickster lives within me. It has to, in order for me to expand consciousness. So there wouldn't be offense. In fact, I'm excited when those archetypes show up because they teach me something. There's always something to be learned within each archetypal pattern. The thing is, what is your archetypal pattern? What lives within you, right? So when we're looking at you and your archetypal patterns, right? Aphrodite, oh, hey, hey, Curdy Birdie. I know you're on here. Hi. Um, when we look at Aphrodite and we look at all these archetypal patterns that live within us, we understand how to alchemize the energy within. That's what this spiritual alchemy is about. It's not about denying it. So if I denied it, then I wouldn't be really an alchemist. I would be denying the fact that I could be the trickster, right? Or that I could show up as the trickster. And oftentimes I have in maybe other people's lives and in my own life, in my own consciousness. But then when I recognize that it's showing up, it's like, oh, there it is. Okay, now I'm on a journey. I'm on a journey to recognize and learn something new and to expand the consciousness rather than to circle up and say, I have all the answers. I don't have the answers. I have no answers. Just live my life. And I just go out and I practice alchemy. That's what I do and connect. So, what do you mean, female shadow? How many are there and how to identify an archetypes? Okay, now that's great, Alinga, that you're asking these questions. Archetypes, if you want to go back, you can just sort of look at the patterns, and there's great books to just kind of read about it, but you can watch it in movies. There's probably infinite numbers of archetypes out there. The common ones, though, are Venus and Aphrodite and Thoth, which is the god of wisdom. And you know, and then there's Dionysus, and there's you have the trickster, like the coyote, right? Who's the trickster always, but always duping himself too, right? I dupe myself all the time. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant to do. But okay, so how do you know who the archetypes are that you embody? You have to know who you are. You have to know who you are. The journey starts within, not without. So you're not really looking externally. You can, because there's greater patterns, but you can't understand the pattern of society until you understand the pattern of yourself. Knowing you first. Do you think that Hindis having 3 million gods is a similar concept? Yeah, yes, it is. Yes. Gods and goddesses, right? They hold the archetypal pattern, and you'll see that they play out through the storylines. When you go into the Hindu Vedas and all that stuff, you'll see that those particular gods and goddesses were playing out certain things in life. Preach it, sister. I love you, Lala. You're so cute. So, yes, the archetypal patterns show up, and that's just another way to describe it. Could be small g goddesses, and they come in and they play, right? And we embody that. So you have to know yourself first. You have to know who you are in order to understand what's at play. Who are you internally? And when you start to understand who you are and know who you are and get firmly grounded in who you are, you're going to start to see the small patterns within you, and then you're going to understand how it's magnified in the entire scope of the world. And it's cool. That's why this journey starts within. Mahabharata talks about it. Yes. The Mahabharata and Ramayana. Yes. Who am I? So hard. I know it's so hard, Linga. I know. I get it. It is. And it's a journey. I don't think you'll ever know, right? It's like you could be the trickster, and then you could be this Aphrodite, and then you could be like Thoth, and then you could be the inner child, and you're all these things. And I know exactly who I am at almost any given moment. There's not an archetype inside me that I don't know that's playing out, and I can call it out. And these patterns get played out all the time. But that's why I can get on here and speak authentically, because I understand who I am. Okay. And when I don't understand who I am, I'm in search of it, right? Because that's what we do. I'm going to stick to music. Yes. And Linga, that is why it is harder for the camel to go through the head of a needle than people to do the work. Not an easy thing. Been doing it my whole life. I'm a big bear. Oh, Curdy Birdie. Yes, you are. I don't know if you're still on here, Curdy. but I have a ton of different things inside of me. And that's why I'm able to, it's relatable, right? I can relate to the trickster for sure. And as Quad D said, you're the trickster, no offense. And then I don't feel offended. I'm not offended. Um, because I'm sure I've played that trickster role in somebody's life. Absolutely. Played it out. So, but knowing that it's there and recognizing and understanding another thing, again, understanding that when they show up, it's not a bad thing. It's an opportunity to expand our consciousness into new ways of engaging the world in ways that we didn't even know existed. Freaking awesome. It's cool. It's cool because now we're seeing life from a whole new lens. And that's how we go from third dimensional time space to fifth dimensional time space and sixth dimensional time space. If we stood in the same perception of the three-dimensional time space, we would never transcend. That's not possible. You have to be able to see things through a different lens in order to do that. Okay. Good. Awesome. All right. So thank you for your participation, Kwati. I think you're out of here, but I just appreciate you always engaging. I love when people engage, and tell their stories of what their truth is, because their truth is their truth, and I'm not ever going to take that away. I think it's beautiful that people are creating their truth. It's beautiful, as long as it's for the good of all humanity. Go for it. Your discussions never cease to amaze me. Thank you. I pay to pay you back. Remind me to play. Yay! Can you play now, or is it too late for you? You can. I will totally stay on if you're gonna play. I'll stay on and listen to music all day, any day. One quick one. Yay! Call in Linga. So Linga's gonna play us some songs. I love it. Okay. Always wait for you to call in. Yay! Invite. Yay!
Good morning.
Hello.
It's actually morning for me too now.
Oh my God, it is. I'm so sorry, Linga. I'm like, is this early or late for you?
That's good. Awesome story.
Oh, thank you.
Really cool. Yeah, I must have caught the tail end of it, but it's really interesting to, I don't know. It's a bit overwhelming though when you think about having to try and work out everything.
Oh yes, it is I think I overwhelm people all the time with my That's why I'm on podcasts. Like, how can you talk so much? What do you talk about? I'm like, I have so much to say.
You're in your millionth hour.
But it's good. And, Quad D, I hope Quad D's still on here. But maybe not. But what are you gonna play for us?
So I'll just play the first song I thought of. It's probably
Yay. Okay.
I'll have to put my mic down so I can't hear the echo. Can you hear that all right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, I hope you're all having a good day out there. I'll play this quick one for you.
Yay.
Standing out, calling all the people here to see the show, calling all my demons now to let me go. I need something, give me something wonderful. I believe she won't take me somewhere I'm not supposed to be. can steal the things that God has given me. No more pain, no more shame, no misery. You can take me down, you can break me down, you can take me down. You can take me down, you can break me down, you can take me down. Love and hate, how much more are we supposed to tolerate? Can't you see there's more to me than my mistakes? Sometimes get this feeling makes me hesitate. I believe she won't take me somewhere I'm not supposed to be. You can't steal the things God has given me. No more pain, no more shame, no misery. You can take me down, you can break me down, you can bring me down. You can break me down, you can take me down, you can take me down. I can see that place of trouble. I can't stay away, I'm on the verge. The love of everybody. Now I feel some days of trouble. I'm in a house of war, I can't stay away. For the love of everybody, I can't stay away. Look behind the wall. Standing now, calling all the people here to see the show. Calling all my demons now to let me go. I need something, give me something wonderful. You can take me down, you can break me down, you can break me down.
Yay! It's so good.
You're welcome.
I love it. I'm like, you can just come and play.
Yeah, sure.
Just come and play on the podcast. I won't even talk. I'll just listen to music the whole time and dance. No words needed.
Good for you.
Yay, Linga. And that was like so it's so clear. Not because you know what I mean, right? Like it's you sound very like clear. Really good. Yes.
Good. Good.
You need to have a band. You need to keep playing. I'm sorry, I love music so much. I'm like, oh, let's just keep going. But I know you have to go.
No, I can stay as long as you want, but I mean it's your show, so I'm not gonna.
I don't want you more Linga. I'm like, yo, Linga, just stay up for the rest of your life and play all day and night. How about that?
Well, that's what it's for.
It's up to you. I don't want to. I don't want to keep you from sleep either.
Look, so I mean, you run a pretty good show. Like I've been listening to you for probably a year now, and
it's like this. I just wanted to say it's kind of like, I don't know if other people feel like this, but every time I listen in, I'm like, oh, that's like what I was thinking today.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Tell me what you were thinking. Like how was it the trickster part of it?
Uh, yeah, it was because like I've been getting thrown some red herrings from people,
Hmm.
and um, it was in relation to work, but it was a couple of things that I was like, that's everyone knows that's not right, everybody knew it wasn't right, but then I was trying to work out why this person said what they said, and then I thought to myself, well, maybe I got it wrong, you know,
Uh-huh,
and
uh-huh,
then
uh-huh.
like relook at the situation, and he was still wrong. Like it's not correct what he was saying.
Right,
Like
right, right.
logically, it's not correct, but maybe his perception of it, that's what it was.
Yes. And then when you start to look at it, though, you see life from different perspectives. And then it
Yeah.
somehow expands your consciousness, even if it's not right. Right. There's always this like journey to try to rectify what is true and what's not. And then you like tease it out. And then somehow in the middle of that, you've expanded your consciousness in some way. It's
Well,
kind
there's
of
a little moment of hesitation where you're not sure, and I think it's those moments where you go, "Oh shit, I'm about to learn something." You know what I mean?
yes. And then you go into it, you're like, wait, what? Is it
Yeah.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. And then that's kind of like that's why the flat earth part is something that I've been kind of like, okay, is it wrong? Is it right? Does it matter? I don't know. If it does, how does that play into my life? Like, those are the bigger questions too. Because if it's wrong, if it's misdirection, what is that doing to the people that are being misdirected? Then how do we support those that are being misdirected into understanding that it is a misdirection? But then they go on their journey for misdirection to come back to a new way of understanding the world too. And that's kind of where creativity lies too.
Yeah. Well, for me, I think it's about critical thinking. To be honest, I think that
Sure.
if you can start critically thinking about things, then you're no longer just walking around believing whatever you're told.
Yeah.
Becomes a bit more of you know, you form an opinion based on something that you've looked into. That's a bit different to just believing.
Yeah. Yes. I think you're right. It kind of ignites that intellectual wanting to know what is truth journey. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. So you've like gone down the path of going, well, maybe, and then that creates a curiosity. And I actually
Uh-huh.
don't think there's enough curiosity in the world. Like I don't have a
Sure.
problem with flat earthers. I don't conceptually agree with it, but it doesn't matter because it did get me thinking about it.
Sure. And that's exactly it. And then you're right, the critical thinker. So what I've read those NASA all 30 some pages of whatever it was, and I didn't read the whole 30 some pages, but I read a lot of it and I was like, oh, interesting. Would I've ever read that? No. Would I've ever cared? No.
Yeah,
But now I know that they do aerodynamics on flat earth, no non-moving earth. And I've read the document. It's like right there. But then they have some on other things, and then they use it for certain flight patterns, but also when they're using missile aircraft, it's on a spherical moving earth. So depending on what they're using, they use different mathematical equations, is from what I understood out of it. So but I don't know how that makes a difference for me just yet. I just know that maybe I know a little bit about how they do the mathematics around aerodynamics.
but
Which
that's
is
only the construct that they've put in
cool.
place to understand it, right?
The what? Say that again.
That's only the construct that they put in, like the mathematics or the
Mm-hmm.
theory
Mm-hmm.
is the
Mm-hmm.
construct that they've put in place to be able to understand something that essentially is incomprehensible. You know,
Yeah.
like the whole physics of flight and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was watching that because I'll nerd out to physics and stuff like that and watching it. But do I understand it? No, I mean, I can't do it. I understand it. Here's what I do understand, though. This is really cool. Um, I have so Carl Jung, right? He mapped out there's the map of the soul is what he was trying to do. Map out what the soul looked like, kind of. And then we have Walter Russell, who is probably my favorite person beyond Jung because I think he did a more comprehensive map of the soul than Jung himself. And me, I have constructed a map of my soul and what that looks like. Now, when I construct it, it comes in the pattern of sacred geometry. In sacred geometry, when we understand sacred geometry and we start to apply sort of the different principles, when I look at it in physics, it actually overlaps in physics. And it's weird because, I'm not a physicist, but when I look at my models of my map of my soul, I can construct it and understand physics from that particular space, which is interesting, right? It's like how, if people really know who they are and start digging into who they are and start mapping out their soul and understand the archetypes, they start to understand the bigger patterns that physics, it's in physics. Everything is all encompassing. So it's there, the patterns within you, which is really kind of weird and crazy. So this process happens internally, but people are applying it externally instead of applying it internally. And that is the key to transcendence. That's what I try to tell people over and over again. That's the key. If you look on the external and look for answers externally, you're only seeing one part of the story. The bigger part of the story is internal, and it all lives within us. Like we're a constellation, right? We're an entire universe. Like we're a walking universe. Like I don't think people get the magnitude of that. We're a walking universe, Linga.
It's a lot to comprehend if we can't even work out if the world's flat.
You know what I'm saying? It's like we're huge. We're vast. We have so much. And then when we look at ourselves and we start to look at the map of our own soul, which people don't know how to do. They don't know how to map out their own soul. Like to tell somebody, do you have a map of your soul? I can guarantee. So, and I could be wrong, but all the people listening, do you have a map of your internal soul? Do you know what that looks like?
I don't even know what it's made of.
Well, when we look at it, we say DNA and cells, but what's underneath all that, right? But have you constructed your own internal soul? If you do that, you'll understand physics a lot better. You'll understand you'll look at the aerodynamics. You may not know the actual symbology that they put behind it, but when you look at the whole model and the construct of it all, you'll see that it's pretty similar. It's quite crazy and interesting. But people won't map out their soul. They'd rather map out the earth and the stars and the constellations. But the constellation stars live within them because they are a constellation. They are a universe. They're a walking universe. That is the message. If anybody gets anything out of my podcast ever, that's what I'm trying to tell people. But to find it and to understand it and to really go on a journey of self-enlightenment and understanding themselves, they have to apply the work to themselves. You have to. There's no other way. And every great sage, every great teacher, if we look in history, they all say the same thing. The answer is within. Look inside. Stop trying to figure out what's happening externally and just look internally, and then you'll understand as within, so without. And then there's your answer. And then you're like, oh, okay, shit, now I get it. Then it starts to grow. And the cool thing about it is it starts within you as this tiny little speck that it starts to expand. You start to see the construct of your own self. Okay. Then it goes even deeper, right? And then it starts to see the construct of the family dynamic. And then you start to go even bigger to the community. Then you start to go into like the societies, and then you get bigger and bigger. And before you know it, you're really just looking at these archetypal patterns that are just getting played out over and over again. And the storyline becomes the same. And then you start looking in history and you're like, that's why we don't learn from history, because we just keep playing out the same storyline over and over and over and over and over. And you can see it. And then they say, well, there's prophets. And that's why I get into the topic of prophecy. Well, they're prophets. No, they're not. They're just good pattern readers. They just can see the patterns. That's it.
The recurring patterns.
Yeah. I could talk to somebody and know their patterns. Why? Because I know myself. Because I understand. And then you can understand the archetypes that are at play. And you're like, oh, this is Lala. So my friend on Facebook, she's like, I want to learn how to map my soul. I love you, Lala. You're so cute. Okay, if people want to learn how to map their soul, they've got to start asking the question every day, who am I? And look in the mirror and ask yourself that a million times, looking at your own eyeballs. See what happens to you.
Yeah. I reckon I've done that as a kid before.
Yeah, and then what happened? Did you get a little afraid?
Yeah, I remember I was looking into like a bunch of mirrors.
Oh, yeah, uh-huh.
And it was like a eternal mirror. You know, like as they get bouncing off each other.
Yeah. Yes.
And I remember having that because you could see yourself in it, but you were everywhere and nowhere at the same time.
Yes.
And I remember going, wow, that's like a portal. Like, I don't know how to explain that.
Oh, my Linga. I was on the other side of that mirror looking at the same thing. I used to do the exact same thing. Yeah, see, I bet you we're like brother and sister in another dimension, time, space. We were twins. We're the twins. We're Gemini. No,
I'm not. Speak to yourself.
I'm not a Gemini. No, that we're the twins. That's what Geminis are, right? The Geminis are the twins. Yeah. Okay, so when I was young, and it's funny that you say that. So me and my cousin would be playing, right? And he had a water bed. His mom had a water bed, and we'd go on the water bed and we'd be like, jumping on it kind of. And she had two mirrors, just like you were saying. And I would look through those mirrors and do the same exact thing and think the same exact thing. Like, whoa, this like goes on forever. Like it's like Alice through the looking glass. Like I can go through this dimension. And I used to tell that to my cousin. He's like, what are you talking about? But like, I always had those thoughts, like what's on the other side of that? And if we saw life that way, okay, so here's another thing might blow your mind. Lala, if you're on here still, and people that are wanting to know how to map their soul, think of it this way. Think of you as a projected image that is however many times removed from its source.
Like a copied image?
Yes. But it gets distorted as it goes further.
Yeah.
So to get back to source, to your divine source, you have to go internally. And then when you know where your reflection comes from, then you can understand what phase you're in this particular time and space.
Okay.
Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. I can follow that.
Yeah.
So like if you were going to sort through the copies,
yes,
then you'd be looking for the things that show up like that are strong. Like on the last copy, so I'm talking about, but on the last copy of yourself or the last projection of yourself, you're going to find a trace of something that's going to be reflected on the previous one.
Correct.
Which is going to be reflected even stronger on the one before that.
Right, until you get to the source of who you are.
Okay.
and the core. So it's almost like you're working backward, right? Like there's layers. So if you were to so think about it, if you're looking in the mirror and you're like, whoa, I'm everything and I'm nowhere, but there is a you that's somewhere that's projecting all of that. You're standing there looking at this infinite pattern that's going on forever. And you can step through those. Imagine if you could step through those. But as they go further out, they're more distorted from the original of what it was. So then you're coming back into your original copy.
Mm. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. And then it goes deeper into origin story. And of course, there's more. And that's why I talk forever, because there's so much. And and it's never ending.
Discovered a new concept of forever after talking about the mirrors. But anyway.
Isn't it crazy though? The mirrors, it's funny. I used to do the same thing. I swear to God. I would look at the mirrors and I'd be like, whoa, because they had that and it would just line up and it'd go one way and the other way. And I'm like, whoa.
Another thing I only just discovered yoga about 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I started practicing every day, and I got I started to learn a lot of the movements. And what I realized was they all felt really natural to me, and they were like movements that I'd done as a child, like just they're just things like movements that maybe and then I've watched like my 2-year-old, and she does a lot of the movements, but she does them organically, she doesn't know the movements. And I guess for me, I found that doing like the physical stuff actually took me back to my child copy of myself,
Wow.
which is probably closer to something else. You know what I mean?
Yes, 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 absolutely. That is when we were our most connected into source, because we weren't like programmed. Or we were less programmed. They were trying to program us at that time, right? Program us to be however they wanted us to be, parents and society and all that stuff. And we kind of, but we, yes, when we are in our childlike innocence, that is the closest. And that's where that connection came from. And we get lost in that. So every child comes in knowing who they are. They know.
I know.
And then it gets lost, and then you get wrong for thinking that, right? And then people try to program you to believe their own construct of how this is this world, and you're like, yeah, but that's not how I see it. But then you're forced into it, then somehow it becomes your reality. So yes, that is probably the purest form of your copy. When you were young, you knew it.
My son, he's 7 now, and he cannot recall anything from before being 5. And it's really interesting because he used to say things to us when he was 3, because he could talk really early.
Mm-hmm.
Probably 2. He was pretty fluent, and he used to say things like, "I picked you," like I picked you from the shop. That's where I found you. And he said that to Mum, not so much me, but that's all right. But then he would say things like, "I don't want to forget,"
Oh.
like as he was going to sleep. So you could tell that he was obviously recalling something else.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Yep.
And he
Yep.
kept saying, "I don't want to forget. I don't want to forget it. Like I can't. I'm trying to remember it. I can't remember it anymore."
Oh man.
As he got older, it's pretty cool.
So yes. And I bet you it was the language that he was using. Because and I don't know if this was his exact language, but he said he didn't want to forget, which means he forgot. Yeah. And then when he got older, he said, I want to remember.
Yeah.
So this is why language is critical, especially if you're working with children or even yourself, that rather than saying, I don't want to forget, say, I'm going to remember. I will remember.
As in the reinforcement. Yeah.
Yes. Yes, and it was maybe the fear of not remembering, right? The fear of that being gone and lost. But you know what? It's not. That's the point. The point is that he has a journey to remember. That's his journey, is to remember. And if he already declared it so, then it's so, meaning he'll circle back to it.
Yeah. Okay.
Does
Is that
that,
the
does
intent?
that, yeah, it's intent. So his journey was to forget to remember. That's the trickster probably role too, right? The trickster comes in and says, don't forget, and then you forget, only to remember. You see what I'm saying? The
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
storyline gets
Yeah.
played out. Yeah. So
That makes sense.
yeah, and kids are like that. They're like that. They're open. I was very fortunate to remember everything. I remember everything. And
Oh wow.
yeah, that's the reason why, and this is another reason why I do this podcast, because I remember. I remember everything. I remember who I am. I remember, and I didn't never forgot. So I think more than not is that people forget. And I think that's the big journey, is that most people just forget who they are. And then you start talking to them, and then memories start to resurface of when they were kids, when they were little. They were like, I thought I was crazy. It's because society
Yeah.
said you're crazy. That's not how it is. And you're like, yes, it is. I know it is.
They labeled you to fit in.
Exactly. And then we play into those labels and so on and so forth. But at the raw end of it, when we're children, we are the closest to our divine self. We're pure, open heart, open mind. We're just taking in this new space that we came into. We know where we came from. We understand that, and then it gets lost. And then we go on this journey to remember. and
Yeah,
hopefully
yeah.
and hopefully we do. Hopefully we wake up and remember. Some people don't. Some people stay asleep, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
But I imagine your son is gonna. I feel it. Your son will remember, because that's the journey he created, was to forget to remember. So he'll come back around.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Yeah, it's nice having little kids in your house for that reason.
Oh yeah, amen. That's why
Yeah.
I'm like a little kid. I'm still like a kid. I still feel like I'm 3 years old sometimes. I'm like, are you sure that I'm as old as I am? I don't think so. I still think I'm a child.
Well, maybe.
I'm
You might
still
have a
three.
few iterations of yourself to go.
I know. Gosh, this crazy life. But I'm so proud of you. And
Thank you.
I know that you're on your journey, and I think you get it, and that's really good. And I think a lot of it too is because you've delved into like tarot and card reading and understanding all that stuff. Um, you've got a really good handle on it. I think you're the embodiment of it. I think you're truly living it, and that's why you understand it. That's the only way you can, is by really
It
living
just,
it.
yeah, I think there's just been lots of pieces until now. I'm just starting to put them together, you know?
Yes, yes, but you're very insightful, right?
Yeah, depends who you're talking to, but yeah.
You are, Linga. You're very insightful. Really, you are. You can have these conversations, and you get it. You're on your journey, which is good, and that'll actually, the fact that you are making steps. I'll say this, to shift and change your story, will be that blossoming and that opening for your son. That's really
Oh,
what
yeah,
it
okay.
is.
I never thought about it that way. But yeah, you're probably right.
It is. Oh, it totally is. You heal. Like, you have this ability to heal your family, right? Through your actions. And then
Yeah.
once you do that, they start to heal. It's pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. And you're doing great. So proud of
That's
you.
cool. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for playing. Thank you for being a part of the journey. Not everybody can hang in there. Some people hang on and then they let go. They're like, I can't anymore. Just want to. Okay, I'm like, okay, it's okay.
Hey,
So I don't know.
there's this song I was thinking about. I don't know if you know Sturgill Simpson. Like he's pretty big at the moment in the country scene.
No, I
But
don't
he wrote
know.
an album called A Sailor's Guide to the Galaxy. Sailor's Guide to Earth,
Uh,
and he wrote it for his son as like all the stories about
uh,
how to move your way through life. It's a beautiful album. Um,
wow.
and he wrote this song called All Around You, and I don't know if I can indulge you for 2 more minutes.
Hell yeah. You
It's
don't
just
even got.
beautiful.
Please do. Please.
All right. Well, it's a cool song, but you should check out the album.
I will check it out. Yes.
I'll send it to you.
Okay.
All right, and then I'm gonna have to go to bed.
Okay. Okay. Yes. Yes.
There will be days when the sun won't shine, when it seems like the whole world is against you. Don't be afraid, life is unkind. You can let go of the pain if you choose to, 'cause time slips away and skies fall apart, revealing to all a universal heart, flowing, flowing all around you. There will be nights that go on forever, like you're long lost at sea, never to be found. Just know in your heart that we're always together, and long after I'm gone, I'll still be around, 'cause our bond is eternal, and so is our love. God is inside of you, all around and above, knowing, showing you the way. Time slips away, skies fall apart, beating too hard, a universal heart, glowing, flowing all around you.
Yay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linga.
You're welcome. Have a
What a
beautiful
gift.
night.
You too. Sleep well.
Thanks. See ya.
So, just want to thank Linga for that beautiful concert. I get to sit here all day listening to music like that. So beautiful. And what a gift, right? That's why I say thank you, God. Thank you, universe, for these gifts that you give us, because that is a gift right there. That's how I feel. Gift from God. See, God moving through another individual, move to share gifts with us. So amazing, right? Love it. Just makes me want to cry. Touches my heart in so many ways. Um, and then the gift of giving to your son, if you're still on here. I know that we were talking about your son. And so, in a way, we dedicate that to your son and for his remembrance, right? To come to memory, and remember what he was afraid to forget, that he will now be ingrained in his subconscious mind now. See, it's subconscious there. It's not unconscious, but it's already been conscious. And now it's sitting in the subconscious waiting to be re-identified. So we send that beautiful gift of love from you, Linga, to your son. And so love it so much. Look forward to hearing Linga again, because I have Linga every day on the podcast. Open up with the song and end with the song. So we won't go so long so that you can go to bed. Okay. So there you have it. I love you guys so much. Pretty long podcast today. And I hope you enjoyed. If you guys are just getting on this podcast, go rewind and listen to Linga. You don't even have to listen to me. Just go to the songs and listen to the music. I think you'll enjoy that. Okay. So I love you guys. Have a fantastical day, and I will see you all tomorrow. Bye.